Hello, my name is Gareth Machin and I am the Artistic Director of Wiltshire Creative. As part of our new programme of work, Wiltshire Creative Connects, I'm delighted to introduce the first of our weekly big interviews and even more delighted to welcome our first guest. He's a man who needs little introduction. He is the creator of ITV's hit drama Broadchurch and currently the executive producer of Doctor Who. But perhaps more importantly than that, he is also the writer of the 2014 hit stage comedy Worst Wedding Ever that premiered at Salisbury Playhouse. He is, of course, Chris Chibnall. Chris, hello, welcome.
Hello, Gareth. This isn't weird at all, is it?
How lovely to see you in the wonderful world of Zoom.
It's very nice, and I think your audition to be Stephen Colbert is going very well so far.
I'm going for the John Oliver look with the backdrop, but
nice.
I'll take Stephen Colbert. That's good with me.
Yeah, very good.
Well, how are you doing? We're meeting in extraordinary times.
Yeah.
How is the lockdown affecting you, and how are you coping with it?
Well, all right. I'm probably the same as everyone else, really. I think it's weird, isn't it? It's like time's going very fast and very slow at the same time. So every day's the same and slightly different. I think we're very lucky. We live in Dorset, and so we've got lots of walks from the door and stuff like that. I've got 2 teenage sons, so we have cracked out. There was a table tennis table in our garden that hadn't had much use, and so that's now become in daily use. So I have a ritual of daily humiliation by my kids, where I get beaten at table tennis, and every day I approach it with that. Maybe today I'll take a game off them, but no, they're getting better. I'm just getting just like that. But yeah, I sort of have no idea how we're coping, because it's like we're all sort of, we're all still speaking to each other in the house most days, not all days, and then I guess it's really you're sort of living in kind of multiple zones, aren't you? You're living in a kind of present that isn't like anything else. You're kind of mourning the past, and then there's these multiple different versions of the future that we're all speculating about and that none of us really know about, and that's occupying quite a big part of probably all our conversations and all our brains, but you can't do anything about it. You can't control it, you can't influence it. So you just living in the same kind of multiple possibilities that everyone else is, really. And meanwhile, we're just finishing up some post-production on Doctor Who and doing that. So yeah, and doing some writing. So as a writer, the thing is, like, lockdown is about 60% of lockdown is what my life is like anyway, which is just being on my own in this room and doing some writing. So that bit hasn't changed, but everything else has.
Yeah, it has, hasn't it? And I suppose one of the things that's changed is the fact that we can no longer go out and enjoy shared collective artistic experiences, something which I think we've all just taken for granted all of our lifetimes, really. And I mean, obviously a lot of your work has been on television, of course, but I mean, I think it'd be fair to say that the live theatre performance has always been a big part of your creative life as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's where I started in theatre, and so it's been a big part of my life since being a kid, and it's been a big part of my career, and that does feel like one of the things that you really, the things that, it's the thing of being in lockdown, isn't it, you're very quickly realizing the things you took for granted that would always be there, and that you were doing. So yeah, absolutely, going to the theatre, going to football, all that kind of stuff. And for me, the theatre has always been a really brilliant place to return to. I've always really enjoyed working there, and it feels a big part of me, even though a lot of my career has been in television, actually. And one of the reasons, obviously we've worked together both at Salisbury and before that, and much earlier in my career. Yeah, feels really integral. It's very hard to comprehend that that's not going on. Although even in lockdown, you know, I saw Phantom of the Opera the other day on YouTube, and I'd never seen Phantom of the Opera, so I was really delighted about that. And so, you know, I find myself still reaching for these things. It's like I'm watching old football matches, and I'm watching, you know, live relays of theatre, obviously the stuff the National are doing, and the musicals that are going up on YouTube. Really enjoying. So yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? It exposes all those things you don't have and that you sort of suddenly cleave to. You realise the tribes that you're part of from the things that you go, I've really missed that.
Yeah, no, of course. And I mean, it'd be lovely to talk to you about Worst Wedding Ever specifically, as obviously that's a play that is still very much in people's minds here in Salisbury. And it's a play, as I say, that we premiered in 2014. But you and I started talking about it quite a long time before that, I seem to remember.
Yeah, it was probably 3 or 4 years before it, wasn't it? Yeah, and I'd wanted to do a play about a wedding for a long time, and I'd also wanted to do a big main house comedy. Was how you and I started talking about it, because I suppose in television, the stuff I've done has been, obviously there's Broadchurch now, there's Doctor Who. Stuff prior to that has been more drama. You wouldn't accuse Broadchurch of being full of jokes, but really in theatre, a lot of the stuff I've done has been more comedy, to be honest, and I really felt like I wanted to write a big main stage comedy, a really kind of great night out for everybody, and a kind of the play about something that was quite universal. And I remember the first conversation, because I've been through that period in my life. I think we all go through where you're going to a lot of weddings. Like there's this period where your mates get married and you go to lovely weddings and outrageous weddings. If you're unlucky, you go to a terrible wedding or two, and I'd been through all that, and it really lodged in my mind. And we were talking about, how many plays are there about weddings? And I seem to remember we went to the National Theatre Literary Department, because we started working on this at the National Theatre Studio a long time ago, we checked up on all the plays about weddings, and there really weren't any, and I was really surprised about that. And that was a big encouragement. And then we just did a lot of research, which was really fascinating. So you can probably remember better than me, but we talked to wedding photographers, we talked to an amazing vicar in Waterloo.
I remember going to John Lewis, I think.
Yeah.
The memorable one for me.
That's right. Yes, you and I went and got our wedding list together at John Lewis. Yeah, that's right. We talked to them about all the things that people put on their lists. And actually the play starts in John Lewis with the main character and compiling it on a sort of scanner. That really inspired the opening scene where she's going around adding the things to her list on a scanner. And so there were lots of things: florists, dressmakers. It was just the whole industry of weddings, which was really interesting and really fed into the play. Bands as well, all that kind of stuff. So it was really, the question then became, we did a lot of research on that, and then the question became, what is the play, and how do you kind of bring all that into it? And what also felt interesting was doing a play with the two main roles being for women, and the mother and daughter relationship was the thing that everybody who we talked to, everybody came back and said, well, the main thing is the relationship between the mum and the bride, and actually you think that we heard that terrible phrase bridezilla a lot, but actually what a lot of people are saying is, oh no, that's nothing. It's the mother of the bride who's the strongest element in planning weddings and on the day. So that sort of became the center of the play then, and then it became apparent it would be a family it had to be about a family at its heart. So yeah, that's my memory of how it all sort of developed a little bit.
Yeah, no, that's right. And I think one of the questions that you kept coming back to, which I think really gave the play definition, was that question of whose day is it?
Yes, yeah, that's right. Yeah, because everybody wants a stake in it. So the father of the bride gets to do his speech, but also who pays for it. I think the recurring thing that came up through the research all the time was the person whose day it categorically isn't is the groom's. It's like that's literally the last person on the list, and that becomes part of the running joke in the play. So who does it? And but I think what also I think unlocked it a bit was thinking, oh, okay, these guys can't afford a lavish wedding, because it was the costs of wedding. I think that when we were researching it back then, the average cost was 20 grand. So, and that's nearly 10 years ago now. So who knows what it is now. And so to put it under some pressure, then for it to be a bespoke wedding where they do it in their back garden, and then it started to feel like, oh, okay, you can understand the pressures that's going to put on family relationships, on the relationships between siblings, and also bride and groom and all that kind of stuff. So once we sort of thought, oh great, there's a lovely little crucible if they're doing a kind of homemade bespoke wedding, because like a lot of people, they can't afford to sink 20 grand into a wedding. So it was very apparent from the start there were so many things that would give you fun and comedy, and that there were different types of humor to be found in it as well. You know, I remember that it was there's the relationship between the characters, but then there's also quite a lot of situational comedy, and then there's the pressure of a live event happening on stage that then becomes more farcical as the play rolls on as well.
It's interesting you use the word farcical, because I think in the end what you wrote it's hard to characterize it in terms of genres too much, but there was certainly elements of farce within the play. And I think that was one of the things that excited me most about the play when you were talking about it, that ambition to write, yes, a big comedy that could fill a main stage, but also to write in that farce genre. And I find it fascinating that farce is still such a popular form of theatre. I mean, you see the revivals of Noises Off or plays like Boeing, but there's very few contemporary writers who want to take the genre on. And I wonder what that's about, why writers maybe resist it.
I wonder if it feels, I think probably, it's a really good question. I think obviously there's a level of technical rules and pacing and the sort of technical demands of farce that you've got to embrace when doing it. And I think that's why probably I didn't start from the point of view of writing a farce, but I think that the second act, when we're kind of on the day of the wedding itself, has absolutely all the elements of farce and plays like one on stage, you know, and the way it kind of gathers momentum and heat and laughs and just kind of escalates is kind of amazing. But it's I think it's slightly daunting and terrifying to go and say, I'm going to make a farce. It's going to be really funny. It's going to make people laugh. And there's a sort of element of physical comedy to that as well, which you have to be really confident in the production. I think it's quite hard to express that on the page just cold, and that was what was so great about being able to work with you and to work in the rehearsal room and to do some workshops and all that kind of stuff. So, but I wonder also if it feels, because it had a sort of heyday at certain points, hasn't it? I mean, obviously you've got the great practitioners like somebody like Fado, who does those absolute classic farces which are continually revived, and you have that, and then I guess there was you've got the Whitehall farces historically, and then you've got the fact that somebody like Ray Cooney absolutely made it his own, made the form his own in the what would you say, the 70s, 80s, 90s. I mean, he's absolutely prolific and long serving. So I wonder if the word became a little bit unfashionable to the new wave of writers coming through. But I don't know, really. I think it's sort of, we stumbled across it by accident because the sort of the demands of it in this, you working to that inevitable narrative climax on the wedding day of the wedding and where things can go wrong and how things can go wrong. But it is a joyous thing to be in the auditorium when that all clicks together and you can just feel the play takes on its own momentum. It's like a runaway train or something. It's just, you just got to hold on, and the joy of just knowing that it's going to those places and that the audience are with it and that they're enjoying it is it's an amazing thing to be part of, just in terms of an audience, really. But I think it has such a it really does elevate the evening, and it's quite transcendent farce when it really sings. You know, you're just there, and you feel like you are in safe hands and that you're just being made to laugh. And brilliant for actors, I think, as well. That's what, if you've got really great actors who are controlling all the gags and how they're landing, that's just it's a very delightful genre to be an audience for when it's all singing. I remember years and years ago seeing Out of Order, which was a Ray Cooney Whitehall farce with had Donald Sinden and Michael Williams in, and I just remember being helpless with laughter at that and really loving that. It was a long time ago now, but it is a form that, and it's a purely theatrical form. It's hard to think, it doesn't really move outside of theatre particularly. You know, there aren't many film or television farces that feel like they're created for those things that really, really pay off and really, really work. But it's a properly theatrical form.
Yeah, and as you say, it is so much about the actors as well. And I mean, we were lucky in both productions of the play. We had some fabulous actors to work with. And I mean, for you coming into the rehearsal room and obviously starting to work with the actors, I mean, what's that like for you as a writer?
That's my favourite bit. I think I love the rehearsal room. It's one of the great things about working in theatre, because you don't get that in television. I think that kind of 4-week process where, whether it's the first time you've done the play or it's obviously we revived it as well with a slightly different cast, it becomes a really great voyage of discovery. It's great to have the work tested. It's great to be able to make changes. It's great to see it all come together. But I've always been a huge fan of actors. You know, generally it's like one of the reasons for working in drama is to see your work performed by great actors. It's such a lovely feeling, and how much you can learn from them. So I love that community of the rehearsal room. I really love being in there. There's a lovely point as well where you can leave, as a writer on a new play, you kind of leave for a week or two. You know, you have that first week where you're doing the first read through, which is terrifying. And then after that, you get the first few days of discovery. And then that point where you sort of have to leave the rehearsal room to get on with it often, and then come back in a week or 10 days and you see what's working and what's not. So it's just a very pragmatic part of the writing process, which is like, okay, that bit's clearly not working, let's fix that, or that bit's really working, or that character's really working, or there's a bit you've missed, those two characters need a scene. I love all that. I love the sort of practical, technical demands of the craftsmanship of it, really. You know, so yeah, rehearsal room, fantastic. Really, really like it.
Yeah, and I mean, talking of that, well, I suppose both in thinking about farce, but in thinking about the craftsmanship of the writing, I mean, it's also about the physical space that the actors are inhabiting. And I think that one of the real stars of the show was the set designed by James Button. I think people still remember some of the extraordinary things, because for people who didn't see the production, there was a live wedding band who played in the foyer as the audience came in, and then you weave them brilliantly into the action, both as characters, but also as a kind of chorus commentating on what was happening. And they would appear in unexpected places in what looked like a very conventional set of the back of a house and a garden.
Yeah, it was that was the brilliant thing. And I remember the conversations we had about that. Yeah, firstly, that the set design was just beautiful and brilliant and really worked. And obviously, when it was revived, I think it was a testament to the original design that really it was pretty much the same with a few little, extra things that you're able to do now the second time around, knowing the experience the first time around, but the fact that it pretty much stayed the same. And that gag, which I think was your idea of the band coming out of various places. They come out of the shed at one point, they come out of the floor and all that kind of stuff was lovely. And I think that thing in theatre of using every trick at your disposal, and we talked about that a lot. So actually having the band in the foyer, but in character. So they were playing it, and they were sort of, and even there was a slight bit of bickering between songs between them, and
they got bookings as well.
But didn't they have a business card? Like a fake business card at the front, and then they got some bookings. So that was great. But it also, what I think was great about that, and we talked about that a lot, was how do you give people a good time from the moment they come in through the doors, and how do they feel like they've entered the world of the show absolutely immediately? So there's not that divide at the auditorium doors. It's actually, A, they're already in a good mood, B, they've already had some entertainment, but that also it's like the threshold of the world of the show, of taking people into the show before they're in the show. And I always felt that was fantastic and worked brilliantly. There was so many, the kind of the foyer area and the different levels and the bar area there was so great for that. And I loved that. It felt, I know we talked about it a lot, it's like using every trick of kind of popular theatre, but also using, and also just the fact that you've got music in a show and they're playing cheesy wedding band covers, but also they're commenting on the action. So there is that kind of element of Greek chorus, but there is also the element of the cheesy wedding band. Felt like, oh, it's great. You can really have your cake and eat it. And I always wanted that show. And I think, I know it's something we shared, is like, how can that be just the best night you can possibly have, And then also to make sure it had emotional layers as well. But really it was like every trick in the book for giving people an amazing night out. And I think the fact that it, did so brilliantly on the first run, and then the fact it came back and did so well again, it was lovely, because I think it's a testament to everybody involved in the show, but also audiences, because audiences were really participatory in it. It was one of those shows that really, a good night in the auditorium there with an audience was a delightful thing, because they were absolutely part of the show.
Yeah, I mean, it was a wonderful, wonderful experience to sit in there and be with a group of people enjoying it. And I think what was fabulous about your writing was that it did have all the wonderful mechanics of farce and some memorable moments that people who saw will never forget. But there was real heart and there was real emotion there. So you really cared about people, which I think, and it's that combination that made it such a compelling collective experience. And I think there was never any doubt in my mind that audiences were loving it. But of course, we do have to let the critics in as well. And I have to say, by and large, there was very, very positive feedback in both local and national press. Do you read reviews? Do you find them useful? Do you?
No, not really. I don't. I used to, when I started out, I think, and then but I was really. So I had a couple of experiences. So before I became a full-time writer, I worked for various theatre companies. I worked for Complicité. And I was lucky to work for them at a really amazing period for them. But there was a production of UNESCO's The Chairs, which was there while I was working for them I was an admin assistant, then I was an administrator there. And that production had Geraldine McEwen and Richard Briers in. It played at the Royal Court, and then it went transferred to Broadway. And I was across it all the way as part of the administrative team doing that. But I remember Geraldine McEwen on that, who had the ravest of rave reviews in that show. And the show was absolutely hugely acclaimed on both continents. We always used to check, you know, do you, with the actors in any show, do you want to be told about reviews? Do you want to know about it? And I remember her saying so clearly, she said, no, I've made my decisions. So that won't help me. So she said, I never read reviews. And she was so brilliant and such a lovely person, so wise, Geraldine, that really stuck with me. And then when I had my first play on at Soho Theatre, so sort of, I guess that was the first. I did some plays in fringe theatres, and I did a play with you, a lunchtime play at Bristol of it, but in the basement, you know. And so Soho Theatre in the main house there was one of the sort of biggest play I'd had on up to that point, a show called Kiss Me Like You Mean It, and I guess that was 2001, 2002. I can't remember the exact year. And after the first night of that, the reviews came out. There were lots of reviews. And there was one review that was so bad and one review that was so extraordinarily good. And I thought, neither of these are sort of useful, because it's like, and the two people were sitting, I remember, sort of were sitting 2 rows apart from each other in the theatre, you know, and it was like, well, I don't know what you gain from it. And also, I think what I find is the best reviews are sitting in the auditorium. So the big thing I do whenever I can is I try and see the shows as much as possible, because then, you know, because I think, so there was the thing, I guess, at Soho. And again, it did brilliantly at Soho, and then it went on and got performed all around the world, and it played in Paris for this amazing run. But those reviews were so extreme, you couldn't say, well, that was an accurate description or that was an accurate representation of what it felt like to be in the auditorium that night as an audience member. And so they're so subjective. I find if you're able to spend the time and be in the auditorium for quite a few nights, you'll know what's working, you'll know what isn't. The audience tell you, you can sense it in your bones. I'm not sure I find them particularly useful, because you kind of know. And I think, you know, we changed some things between the 2 productions of Worst Wedding, and we knew what those things were. And some of those are also choices, you know, something that it will really ruin the evening for them. You go, no, that's the reason I wanted to do the play, or that's what I love about it. So I think you have to have the confidence of your own convictions. And I don't mean reviews aren't useful, you can't learn things from them. It just hasn't proved to be helpful. And often I think the danger is that the reviews don't represent your audience. And so I'm more interested in the audience than I am in the critical response, really, because, but obviously I don't have to sell the seats and market it. And, you know, I can't say I wasn't delighted when there was a big poster of Worst Wedding Ever with lots of stars all over it and great quotes from critics. So I think, you know, it's very important in running a theatre and selling shows and all that kind of stuff. But I think as a writer, I take more from sitting in an auditorium and sneaking around a bar at the interval, and you know, and being there after. You kind of, that's where you learn, and that's where I learned my craft in theatre. In fringe theatres was writing plays and just sitting at the back of the audience night after night after night, because then you go, that joke works some nights, so it's worth keeping in. That joke never works. That joke always works. That moment's a banker, but these are the moments of people's audience's attention wanders, or if you're there enough nights, you start to go, you understand what bits are the play and what bits are you, and what bits are the audiences change every night, because it is the thing of every night is different. You never have the same performance twice. And even if the actors are, and everything technically is exactly the same, and they're always on point, and our cast was so great, but it's the audience changes the show every night. and that I find that endlessly fascinating.
It's so brilliant hearing your enthusiasm and passion for live theatre generally, and the process and the collaborations. And I suppose, you know, the question as somebody running a theatre I have to ask is, what would tempt you to come back and write for theatre again?
Well, no, not much. Time. Yeah, no, you know, I want to write for theatre again, and you know, I want to work with you again. So, you know, and I'd love to write for the Playhouse at Salisbury again, because I thought the audience was great. Everybody who works in that building is amazing, you know, and I'm really thinking of kind of everybody who works there. For everybody, you know, behind the scenes, everybody who works on the admin staff, it's really hard at the moment for everyone. And I think it's really hard for everyone in the creative industries at the moment. So yeah, for me, I think it's scheduling but I think to get back and do another play and really another comedy where you can just feel that joyous kind of roller coaster building, that's I'm really, you know, hopeful we can do that again, because that would be a real joy and really different from anything else I do. So yeah, it's a no-brainer for me wanting to do that again.
Brilliant. Well, I think that's the positive note that we should end on.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm going to stop there before you have a chance to change your mind.
Yeah, it's legally binding, so it's not.
Chris, thank you so much for your time, and it's just been fabulous remembering that brilliant production. And yes, we hope we can see you work in Salisbury again before too long. And wishing you all the very best at this really challenging time.
Yes, stay safe and well. Keep washing your hands.
Indeed. Thank you, Chris.
No worries.
Bye-bye.